Great seeing you here again in our next video in our masterclass in project management. We're talking about project management principles, and in this case I will talk about the project management process. We're going to talk about the different process steps. What are those process steps? Well, first of all, we will start with an overview of the process and the process steps. Then we go to project initiation, the project or the initiation step. We go to the planning step in detail, the execution process step, monitor and control, and finally the closing step, the last step of the project management process. So let's have a look at the project management process. The project management process, well, we have 5 steps in it. First of all, we have the initiating step. Here we are going to create the charter. We're going to identify some stakeholders. Then we go to the planning process step. Here we create the plan, with as a result all the project baselines. When we execute, we are going to create the deliverables. Controlling and monitoring is about verification if the deliverables are compliant with what we described in the planning. And finally, we have the project closing step at the end. Even when everything is finished, we still have some tasks to complete. Let's first go to project initiation. In project initiation, basically, what we're going to do is that once we've selected the business case or the different cases that we have, we're going to create the project charter for each project. The charter is a high-level document, and we describe the project in layman's terms. The reason is to avoid complicated terminology and technical terms, because the charter can be read by people who don't have all the technical knowledge, and putting too much information in there will not lead to an improvement, will not lead to satisfaction of all the stakeholders. The stakeholders want to understand what the project is about, so we have to explain it in a way that the people can understand it. Typically, I've seen charters which were very long with a lot of technical information, which can be quite interesting, but once you want to read it, you want to look at the essence. Compare it with an executive summary. When you complete like a business offer, you have an executive summary at the beginning. That executive summary is describing what you describe in details afterwards. So the charter is a little bit like that, 5 to 10 pages depending on the format. We will look at some possible formats of a charter later in this course. The charter is the driving document for the project, and it's signed by the project sponsor and the project manager. This means that we have a binding contract, we have a binding agreement between the sponsor and the project manager. During the process step of initiation, the next thing what we're going to do is to identify stakeholders. We're going to find the main stakeholders. We don't know all the stakeholders yet, so we limit it to the main stakeholders, and we have to complete that later during the other planning and other steps of the project and during project execution. We will update the stakeholders once we know more and once we finish the planning step. The next step is the project planning. So project planning, we are looking at the charter that has been approved. And once the charter has been approved, we will create the project plan. The project plan is composed of a number of different steps. First of all, we have to identify the requirements and the scope. Then we decompose the project and create the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is decomposed up to the level of work packages, and we continue the decomposition until we reach the activity level. With the activity, we can create a project schedule. We can use methods like the critical path method. We can use activity on arrow or activity on node scheduling methods, and calculate the start and finish times of the activities. Once we have the plan, when we have the start and finish times, we will allocate resources to the different activities. Of course, we also have to understand how long an activity will take. So when we allocate resources to the activities, we can calculate duration and cost, which we need to create the Gantt chart. We finally allocate the resources in the Gantt chart. We see where there are issues and we resolve them. In fact, we adjust the start and finish times of the activities in order to resolve any resources issues. This creates what we call the schedule baseline. We also look at the critical path position, we look at the budgeting, so we can calculate the budget in early start, late start, and planned start, and the relative position of the planned start cost curve to the early start and the late start cost curve is what we call the critical path position. The closer we are to the early start position, the more flexibility we have in the project. The closer it is to the late start position, the less flexibility that we have. Based on this financial information, we can create the budget and allocate the budget allocations, which depend on the financial management in the company. Once this is finished, we look at the risk assessment and the risk management plan, and we will identify the contingency reserve, which will be added to the project budget. We may have to review certain items, and there may be some things that we will have to redo before we find the final plan, but the final output is the project plan with all the baselines. Once the project has been planned completely, we can go to project execution. We may start with project execution, but it's not necessarily. So we have to evaluate the finalized plan and evaluate, compare it with the business case. Do we still comply with the risk level? Do we still comply with the finances, with the timing settings, and so on? So these are a number of elements that we have to do. When we find some issues, when we see that there is an issue with costs or risk or timing even, we may decide not to execute the project, and then we go straight to the closing step, or we can adjust the plan. We can split it up in different phases, which is also a possibility. When we look at the execution, when we complete the plan and we decide to execute the project, during execution, the project team creates the deliverables as defined during the planning. During this, the team registers the actual start and finish times of the activities and their costs. So we register all the information related to the project execution. Then we have project monitor and control. Execution is not the only thing we have to do. It's very nice to make a plan, but we also have to verify how things are going. We have to understand, do we follow the plan? What are the discrepancies with the plan? And we have to verify what are the time, cost, and quality results of the work that we are doing. The project manager also will identify issues like creep and gold plating, and of course take the necessary measures to avoid them. Creep can be very dangerous. Gold plating will result in spending more money, but creep can really have negative effects on the project. So we have to identify them and take the necessary measures. We also use the schedule and cost information to do earned value management. Earned value management will provide us estimates of the conditions of completion of the project, when will it be completed, what will be the cost at completion. It also provides us the difference between the plan and the actual status of the project, and we can communicate that with the stakeholders. The communication or the information that we obtain, like from all the data during execution, we can introduce changes and also propose corrective actions. The last step is the closing project or phase. Typically people say, all the work is done, we created all the deliverables, so work is finished. We also can say, when the customer says, okay, now in Agile, we are happy with the results, so we can stop the project, we complete the project as it is. But it's also important to conduct the closing step. And when we do closing, we are looking at following actions typically. We have to close all the outstanding contracts, and outstanding contracts which are there For example, imagine you had a telephone line that you're using for communication. The telecom company will not close that line as such. You will have, in fact, an issue there because the problem will be that they keep on invoicing even when the project is finished. You have to close that contract. So you have to do that with all the outstanding contracts to avoid issues later on. You have to resolve all outstanding issues. What are the elements that were in the issue log? What conflicts are still open? You have to resolve all of them. An important step is about creating the as-built plans. We may have a project, we may have plans, but we also may have changes. When we made a contract in AT&T about the wide area network, we put there telecom line with certain capacity, we put there a router of a specific type. The things that we don't know there yet are what is the reference number of the telecom line, what exact type of router do we have, what is the software, what are the IP addresses, where is the terminating equipment located, things like that. These can only be done once the project has been completed. And it's very important to understand if you want to deal with some issues or if you want to change the infrastructure, you have to know this. We want to evaluate project success, including profit and loss, so it's very important to see how things are going. Is this project a success? What can we do to improve the success? We conduct a closing review. We want to have an overview of all the things that went good, went bad, how can we improve lessons learned, and so on. We set up invoicing when we have the service completed. It's very important to send out an invoice because without invoice, no payment. And invoices don't have to send at the end. In certain cases, you may specify how you will invoice, for example, when you're updating services. How will you invoice? What are the principles of invoicing? How will you do that over the project duration? And you have to set up and send invoicing. If you have a repetitive service, you have to see that the monthly invoicing has been set up. And that's also a very important element. Of course, it has to be verified that it's going on correctly. You look at knowledge management. What is the knowledge that we gather? And we look at sharing lessons learned. Here again, it's not necessary to wait till the end of the project. We can do it earlier. Every time when we learn something interesting, it is important to share it with the people. And at the end, the last element I want to add here is that we put all the information to the historical database that will be available for future projects. So that was a more detailed overview of the project management process. Get ready for the next video. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you and bye-bye.